The canopy of the great emerald jungle was so thick that the sun rarely touched the damp, mossy floor. But tonight was different. The air was charged with a heavy, sweet electric tension that made the whiskers of Leo the fox twitch with every passing breeze. Leo was a creature of rust-coloured fur and amber eyes, smaller than the jaguars, but swifter than the shadows. He had lived through many seasons of rain and heat, yet the scent drifting from the Heartcrest Ridge was something ancient, a perfume of starlight and honey that only arrived once in a century. It was the scent of the midnight bloom. Leo moved through the ferns with a ghost's grace. He knew his destination well. High atop a spire of weathered stone, tucked away from the prying eyes of the jungle's predators, sat the bud. For 99 years, it had looked like nothing more than a dull, grey stone. But as the moon reached its zenith, the bud began to swell. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic violet light, echoing the heartbeat of the forest itself. Leo climbed the final jagged slope, his claws clicking softly against the obsidian rock. He took his place at the entrance of the small stone amphitheatre that surrounded the flower. He was the guardian, a role passed down through the instincts of his lineage, though he was the only one there to witness the unfolding. As the first petal began to peel away from the core, a cold, unnatural wind swept through the trees below. The vibrant greens of the jungle seemed to wither instantly where the wind touched them, turning to a sickly, ashen grey. This was the shadow blight, a creeping hunger that sought to consume the concentrated life force of the midnight bloom. It was a cloud of living ink, swirling with 1,000 tiny, needle-like eyes. It did not walk or fly. It flowed like spilled oil, climbing the base of the ridge with a terrifying, silent speed. Leo stood his ground. He did not have the size of a bear or the venom of a snake, but he possessed a spark of the very light the flower was beginning to emit. As the shadow blight reached the crest, its coldness nipping at Leo's heels, the fox stepped forward. He did not growl or bark. Instead, he centered himself, his tail fur fluffing out until he looked twice his actual size. The flower opened further, revealing a center of pure, liquid gold. The light hit Leo's fur, turning him into a shimmering ember in the dark. The shadow blight lunged, a tentacle of darkness snapping toward the fragile stem. Leo leaped. He was a blur of orange fire, intercepting the shadow midair. The contact was like plunging into ice water, but the light he carried from the flower acted as a shield. Each time the blight tried to bypass him, Leo was there, a tireless entry leaping from rock to rock. He used his speed to weave a web of light around the altar, his movements guided by a primal dance he had never practiced, but somehow knew by heart. The struggle lasted for hours. The shadow blight grew desperate as the moon began its slow descent. It gathered itself into a singular, towering mass of gloom, preparing for a final, crushing blow. At that moment, the midnight bloom reached its full, magnificent glory. The petals were translucent, vibrating with a sound that felt like a distant choir. The fragrance was so powerful it seemed to heal the withered ferns at the base of the cliff. The light from the full bloom was blinding. It struck the shadow blight with the force of a physical blow. Leo watched as the darkness shattered into a million harmless motes of soot, carried away by the morning's first gentle breath. The forest was safe. The silence that followed was the deepest Leo had ever known. He turned back to the flower, expecting to bask in its glow for the rest of his life. But the nature of the midnight bloom was not to endure. Even as the sun began to redden the eastern horizon, the edges of the petals were already curling. The vibrant gold was fading to a soft, tart cream colour. Leo stepped closer, his heart heavy with a sudden, sharp grief. He wanted to catch the petals, to pin them to the earth, to keep this miracle from vanishing. He nudged a falling petal with his nose, finding it warm for a second before it dissolved into a fine, sparkling dust. By the time the sun had fully cleared the trees, the flower was gone. Only the grey, stone-like bud remained, settling back into its 100-year sleep. Leo sat on the ridge for a long time, watching the jungle wake up. The monkeys began their chatter, and the birds took to the sky, none of them knowing the battle that had been fought or the beauty that had been lost. Leo looked at his own pores. A few flecks of the golden dust still lingered in his fur. He realised then that the greatness of the bloom wasn't in its permanence, but in the very fact that it was fleeting. Its short life had been enough to drive back a century of darkness. It didn't need to last forever to change the world. He stood up, stretching his tired muscles. He descended the ridge, moving back into the deep green of the jungle. He carried the memory of the light with him, a secret warmth that would stay in his bones long after the seasons changed. He was just a fox, and the jungle was vast, but he walked with the steady pace of one who understood that the most beautiful things in life are never meant to be kept, only cherished in the moment they choose to shine. The forest returned to its humid, buzzing rhythm. Leo found a patch of soft moss near a stream and curled into a circle. As he closed his eyes, the scent of starlight seemed to linger on the breeze one last time, a quiet promise kept by the earth. He fell into a dreamless sleep, the golden guardian of a treasure that was now only a memory, yet more real than anything he had ever touched. Leo woke from his slumber to find the great emerald jungle transformed. Though the midnight bloom had withered, the air felt scrubbed clean, and the morning dew held a peculiar, prismatic shimmer. He stood and shook his fur, noticing that the few golden specks of dust from the flower had sunk deep into his coat, granting him a faint, internal warmth that defied the damp shadows of the undergrowth. He knew his task was not entirely finished. The elder's tale spoke of the after seed, a single crystalline kernel that formed only after the shadow blight was defeated. This seed was the heartbeat of the next century, and if left unattended on the exposed ridge, it would be claimed by the wind or the mountain eagles. Leo turned his gaze back toward the Heartcrest Ridge, but his instincts nudged him elsewhere. He looked toward the sunken valley, a place where the jungle floor dropped into a deep, mist-shrouded bowl. The descent was treacherous. The walls of the valley were draped in weeping vines that reacted to movement, curling and snapping like green whips. Leo moved with calculated precision. He waited for the wind to sway the vines, timing his leap so that he landed on stable moss just as the path cleared. There was no room for error. He was a shadow moving through a labyrinth of living emerald. As he reached the floor of the sunken valley, the heat changed. It became heavy and humid, smelling of ancient peat and forgotten rain. The trees here were different. Their trunks were twisted like braided rope, and their leaves were the size of small boats. In the centre of this cathedral of wood lay a small, perfectly circular clearing. At its heart sat a pool of black water, as still as a sheet of obsidian. Leo approached the water's edge. He saw a small, pulsing light at the bottom of the pool. It was the seed, having fallen from the ridge and tumbled through the secret stone chutes of the mountain. It glowed with a steady, amber rhythm, like a coal waiting to be fanned into life. But the pool was guarded. A great constrictor, its scales the colour of moss and river silt, lay coiled around the perimeter. The snake did not move, but its golden eyes followed Leo's every step. The fox did not growl. He did not show his teeth. He understood that in this place of ancient cycles, strength was measured by patience. He sat at the edge of the clearing and waited. He waited through the heat of the afternoon and the cooling of the evening. He watched as the snake's breathing slowed, and the jungle's nocturnal chorus began its climb. Finally, the snake shifted. It uncoiled its massive length, sensing the residual light on Leo's fur. It did not see a predator. It saw a carrier of the bloom's legacy. With a slow, heavy grace, the serpent slid into the underbrush, leaving the path to the water clear. Leo stepped into the pool. The water was surprisingly warm, vibrating with the same frequency as the flower had on the ridge. He submerged his head, his teeth gently closing around the hard, smooth surface of the seed. It tasted of ozone and mountain air. As he pulled it from the water, the light within the seed flared brightly, illuminating the entire valley for a fleeting second. With the seed safely tucked in his cheek, Leo began the long climb back to the surface. He did not return to the high ridge. Instead, he sought out the cradle root, a hollow space beneath the oldest tree in the jungle, protected by a network of iron-hard roots that no blight could penetrate. He dug a small hole in the soft, dark earth between the roots. He placed the seed inside and covered it with a layer of the violet after-dust he had collected from the ridge. As the earth touched the seed, a soft sigh seemed to ripple through the leaves of the great emerald jungle. The cycle was closed. The future was planted. Leo stepped back and looked at the patch of earth. There was nothing to see now, no glow, no fragrance, no grand display. The beauty was hidden, tucked away in the dark where it would grow, silent and unseen for another 100 years. He walked away from the cradle root, his pace light and his heart unburdened. He had protected the flower, he had fought the shadow, and he had planted the tomorrow. As he reached his favourite lookout point, he saw the first stars beginning to blink in the sky. He lay down, the familiar sounds of the jungle lulling him into deep, well-earned rest. He knew that while the most beautiful things are fleeting, the spirit that protects them is eternal.